Welcome to Politics for Happy People, fun conversations about serious issues. I'm your host, Ashley Vaughan.
And I'm your other host, Joseph Backholm. So glad that you are with us early in this journey on Politics for Happy People. If you have just found us, you are a very early adopter in this program, and we are glad that you are. We have just IPO'd, which means the value only increases from here, so welcome aboard, and do share this with your friends and family. If you have learned something, that's our job, is to help you understand the world a little bit better. And if you've done so, somebody else will appreciate that as well. And today, we are going to talk about something that a lot of people don't really understand. School boards gone wild, Ashley. And unfortunately, I don't really love that connotation, but it kind of applies because we are dealing with some school boards who are a bit out of control.
They've gone rogue.
They have gone rogue, gone wild. One specifically that we're going to talk about here, not that far from where we are, Chapel Hill-Carrboro. What's going on up there?
A whole lot is going on. And in order to understand, we need to go back a little bit to 2023, when the General Assembly passed into law the Parents' Bill of Rights. And our organization, North Carolina Values Coalition, was instrumental in that effort. And it's a bill that we supported and lobbied for, and is right in our wheelhouse of issues that we work on, which is parents' rights. And what the Parents' Bill of Rights, Senate Bill 49, did was that it strengthened parental control over the children's education and health and upbringing, and it specifically applied to schools. So it did a couple of different things. It increased transparency by allowing parents to really know what their children were being taught in schools. It also prohibited instruction on sexual activity and gender identity in grades K through 4. It also brought parents into sort of like school counseling type situations that were going on. It gave parents the right to be notified if their child said at school that they wanted to change their name or pronouns.
Now, let's have a little background for where the Parents' Bill of Rights came from. And I think it's important in this context that people might remember. But our neighbors to the north in Virginia made a lot of news around 2021 when there were people running for governor up there who basically said, parents, you're not in charge. It's the experts in the classroom who really are the ones who get to determine what your kids are learning and knowing.
We have a master's degree.
Correct.
We know.
Because we went to a master's, because we have a master's degree, we know what's best for your kids more than you do. And that was one of the things that cost them the election in the gubernatorial race in 2021. And it kind of started this national conversation about who is actually in charge of our kids, because there were curriculum debates, there were bathroom facility debates that were happening there, and can the boys go into the girls' facility? Who's in charge of that? Do the parents have a right to know what their kids are learning? And again, also, COVID kind of helped accelerate that conversation, because
when all the children were at home learning,
right,
the parents were seeing what they were learning, and they were like,
horrified.
wait a minute.
They were horrified.
These things that they're being taught go against our values.
Right.
And we had no idea.
So that is kind of the right. We'll remember that national conversation that led to the adoption of the Parents' Bill of Rights in North Carolina in 2023. And part of the Parents' Bill of Rights was a directive to the school boards to say, hey, school boards throughout the state, you need to adopt policies that are consistent with this. And what happened next?
Okay. Fast forward to 2025, George Griffin, at the time the chair of Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools, was running for re-election, and part of what he campaigned on was that his school board voted and decided to say no thanks to two parts of the Parents' Bill of Rights. I think we have a clip from a public meeting that George Griffin actually said this. Can we play that clip?
2 years ago, the General Assembly passed the so-called Parents' Rights Bill. And it had 12 things in it that schools were supposed to write into their policy. And we got down to the nitty-gritty on it as a school board. And there were 2 of those 12 items that we determined were just blatantly discriminatory. There wasn't any sense of it or anything. And after some prolonged discussion, the board voted to just tell the General Assembly, no thanks, we're not doing this. It was risky, it was out there. But we're trying to make a statement as well as protect our kids and our families. And for us to sit there and try and wordsmith a policy that somehow legitimized discrimination just seemed ludicrous to us.
Okay.
And we said no, and we're the only school district in North Carolina of 115 school districts that stood up to the General Assembly and said, we're not doing this.
Okay, let's stop that clip right there. Now, that's provocative, right? And people are listening to this, and if this is the first time you've heard this clip, you're like, well, what did they not want to comply with, right? There were 12 specific items. We said no to 2 of them because they are quote unquote discriminatory. That's his word. What in the world were they? What was so discriminatory that the state legislature was asking this poor school district to do? Well, we'll tell you, because the first is that they were told not to discuss gender identity with kids in grades K through 4. This was a debate.
That was blatantly discriminatory. Is what
That's
he
what
said,
yes.
what he was saying.
They refer to that as part of this discrimination, and people might remember that the state of Florida had a big kerfuffle with Disney over very similar legislation. They passed a law there also saying, hey, we're not going to teach our kindergartners gender theory, and everybody, like all the normies are like, of course not, that's terrible. You know, the radicals on the left are like, oh, that's terrible. But this is apparently, and so some of the people on the school board in Chapel Hill-Carrboro are part of those who think it's discriminatory not to talk to kindergartners about gender identity, when of course their little brains can't even wrap their heads around those ideas. The second discriminatory thing that they, so-called discriminatory thing that they refused to do is they did not want to alert parents when their children requested to be referred to by different pronouns and were going to socially transition at school. So the Parents' Bill of Rights required the school districts to say, you must notify the parents, and they're like, we ain't doing that. So those are the things that they found to be horrifying, worth defying state law over. So what happened next?
So this clip that we just looked at kind of went viral. It got posted by Libs of TikTok. It started getting national attention. And our North Carolina General Assembly said, no, we are not going to let you go rogue. And you need to come to Raleigh and explain yourselves. So there was a hearing in December where George Griffin, again, that time he was the chair of the school board, and Rodney Trice, the superintendent, they came to Raleigh and answered a whole bunch of questions. And Brendan Jones, his office had done an investigation. They had all sorts of evidence of these violations. And they basically said, oh, but we are in compliance with the law.
And I want to back up a little bit just to make sure that people are following this, because we're talking about a lot of people. And these are names that people may be hearing for the first time today. And so all these characters that we're introducing into your lives. We have Brendan, who's a state legislator, and then we have George and Rodney, who are educators. They're in part of the school board in Chapel Hill-Carrboro. So Brendan Jones sees this quote from George Griffin, chair of the school board, saying, hey, we're not going to comply. And he's like, well, it's not really an option because we're the state legislature and you don't get to decide what state laws you comply with and what ones you don't. So Brendan says, why don't you come down and explain yourself to us in the legislature, because we gave you a directive. We passed a law and you said you're not going to comply with the law. So George and Rodney show up to talk about it. And what they basically say is, oh, I know we said we weren't going to comply, but we really did. right? Because
Right.
the thing that they're afraid of is losing their money, because as much as they want to virtue signal and be, very progressive and defy the discriminatory state legislature, they still want the money from the state government. So they're not going to come in, and give them the middle finger and say, yeah, we're not going to comply with anything, because they need that money. So they came in and told Brendan Jones and everybody else in the legislature, hey, in fact, we did comply. We just said we weren't going to comply. But Brendan Jones kept digging, right? And he said, well, you say you're complying. Let's go look at your books. Let's go find out if you're teaching gender theory and all of those things. So what happens next?
So then there was a further investigation, as you said, which resulted in finding over 150 books in the schools that were teaching gender identity and things that the Parents' Bill of Rights has specifically prohibited. And so there was a more recent hearing, which Rodney came back and they showed some of these books. And let's look at a clip really quickly of what happened here, what Rodney had to say.
So your testimony here today is that there are no materials in your elementary schools, in your school district, in their libraries that describe sexual acts or illustrate them?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Well, then explain to me a book titled Granddad's Pride that openly depicts two men in BDSM outfits making out is currently available in your elementary schools. So is sexual imagery allowed or not?
I don't understand what the challenge is. I see a pride flag, I see community, I see two couples who appear to be in a loving relationship. They're not breaking any laws. They're not hurting anyone. And that's certainly something a child may see in their community. So I'm not sure, what the challenge is there.
Okay. Let's jump in here. And for those who are just listening to this podcast, you might want to go find us on YouTube at Politics for Happy People, because if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the images that Brendan Jones is referring to that he pulled out of these books. And I'll try to describe them for you, but basically they are depicting, a pride parade event, something, lots of familiar kind of rainbow flags, and also these two like grandpas in like leather kind of BDSM stuff in these embraces, and that, nobody would look, normies do not look at this stuff and say, sure, give that to my 4-year-old, right? It's just, and it's not healthy. It's not good. It's very clearly like grooming, trying to desensitize children to things that they should not be desensitized to. Introducing
Conversations and questions which are wildly inappropriate.
Inappropriate, and specifically what the Parents' Bill of Rights said we don't want you doing for kindergartners through 4th graders in particular. Now, you shouldn't do it for older kids either, but that's explicitly prohibited. And there you hear Mr. Trice saying, well, what's the problem? All I do is see these grandpas in leather embracing, and that's just a loving couple, right? Which goes to the state of mind of what we're dealing with some of these education bureaucrats, that they really do want children and the public in general to see images like that and be totally unaffected. And that is, we just have to sit on that for a moment. If anybody is like, oh, the schools are fine, and some schools probably are fine, and not every educator is like this, trying to get your kid ready for gay BDSM stuff. Not every educator is trying to do that, but you have to recognize that there are some who are willing to go to the legislature and actually defend it.
That's right. And you sort of start to realize when you see his answer that we really do have such a sharp divide about what is right and good and best for children. It seems that he really does think this is right and good and best for the children to see. And it is hard for us to wrap our mind around it. And you also see that, this is a more liberal Democratic district. And you see this week events that kind of further illuminate the problem here. In the News and Observer, there was an article that was published. It's an op-ed written by Ann Hardin Tyndall. The title is Chapel Hill-Carrboro Parents to Lawmakers. Don't you have bigger worries than our books? And the article has an alternate headline, something like, legislators, keep your hands off of our books. So it's written by a parent, and it basically is defending these books in the schools, saying we want these books. We want our children to be able to check out these books in school, and we want all the children to see them. And it's written, it was signed onto by nearly 400 additional parents.
Who are saying they want the grandpas in leather?
Yes, exactly. It says, let me just read a bit here. It says, we come together as parents of kids in Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools to set the record straight about how our district's administrators support learning for all of our students and respect the wishes of district parents regarding literature in our school libraries. And it really highlights the deep divide that we have here on this issue about sexuality, gender, all of this, and what is good for children. Our society is divided about this.
Ashley, how do you think the 400 parents who signed that letter would respond if somebody like had Bibles involved? Because we know those have been I don't know if they've actually been removed from other libraries, but I have a feeling that there would be some objection to that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they would say about Bibles being in schools. I know that a lot of Bibles have been removed from curriculum, and yeah, it's a very good question. I don't know the answer to it, to be honest.
Or like a Rush Limbaugh American history book, right? I don't know if you ever read those Rush Revere books or something like. I mean, because the point I'm getting at, the title of the article is, "Hey, legislators, don't you have things to be more concerned about than the books that are in our kids' school?" And I think we just need to recognize how selective that is, because those of us who are concerned about grandpas in leather, we want other books, right? We are outraged by these books, but there are other books that we're fine with that the people who want the grandpas in leather would be outraged by the books that we want, right? Because it really is a clash of worldviews.
It is.
We have a different idea of what is good and helpful and virtuous and good for our children than they do.
That's right.
Somebody has to win. In public schools, as much as we've pretended for a long time, we're going to make them religiously, morally neutral. Neutrality does not exist.
That's exactly
Every
right.
environment has to believe and act as if certain things are good and certain things are helpful and certain things are bad and certain things are harmful. That is unavoidable. And the lie we've been telling ourselves for a long time is that we can actually achieve neutrality. And one of the things that this helps us illustrate is somebody's going to win. Either those books are going to be seen as beautiful and good and virtuous, or they're going to be seen as contraband. And both of those positions can't coexist. And it's not that nobody has a moral position. It's just that we have very different moral positions.
That's exactly right. And any library has to decide which books are in and which books are out.
Because not every book in the world is going to be there.
Exactly. So what are we choosing? What is our criteria?
And why?
Exactly. Well, I think this is a great time to bring on a guest.
Yes.
We have with us today our General Counsel, Mary Summa. She's a former staff attorney for Senator Jesse Helms and a former law professor. And she is going to help us understand a little bit more about what are the various ways that we can deal with a rogue school board, such as Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools. Welcome, Mary. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thanks for having me. It's a busy morning for all of us, I think.
Yeah, you are busy with the start of session and everything, and you're always busy, Mary.
Well, try not to be, but
it's good to have you.
Thank you.
All right, so Representative Jones introduced a bill to kind of help rein in Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools. What can you tell us about that bill, Mary, and what it does to sort of help solve this problem of the school district saying no thanks to the Parents' Bill of Rights?
Well, one of the things that the Parents' Bill of Rights needs, and Representative Jones has attempted to address it, is to put in enforcement provisions. A few years ago, the LGBT community had an entire brochure advising people not to comply with the Parents' Bill of Rights because there was no penalty for non-enforcement. So he's attempting to put in some enforcement provisions in there, basically kind of mirroring what South Carolina did with their recent passage of their bathroom bill, which withholds 25%. The South Carolina law would withhold 25% of funds for noncompliance. Jones does not set a specific amount, and he has a fairly lengthy time in which the county can comply, but he is attempting to put in enforcement provisions in there, so to kind of act as a deterrence for school boards to comply.
So, Mary, a lot of people believe that it's a violation of the First Amendment to remove books that parents find objectionable. Is that a valid legal concern?
No, it depends on the types of books you're removing. The Pico case was pretty clear, even though it was not what's called a majority opinion, where you have 5 justices agree with that the fact in this case that there was a constitutional violation and why there was one. It's a plurality decision, so it doesn't hold the strong precedent that the promoters of this obscenity in schools want you to believe. The Pico case pretty much said, in a nutshell, there are First Amendment protections in schools. You cannot remove books, every book that you disagree with the idea. However, it does not say that books that normalize or encourage dangerous behavior are pervasively vulgar, educationally inappropriate, developmentally inappropriate, or obscene cannot be removed from the schools. The Pico case dealt with removal, not the acquisition of books.
Mary,
So,
if I may, I'd like to ask a follow-up question there, because you talk about terms like the schools can deal with things that are pervasively vulgar and obscene and introducing inappropriate content. Isn't the challenge now, and the Pico case is from the 80s, as you mentioned, is the challenge now that we don't even agree about the definition of those terms today?
well, that's why you have the school boards. It is a subjective test. That's why in HB 636, the bill that Neil Jackson got through the House that's sitting in the Senate, he talked about the removal of sexually explicit materials, which is defined in the statute, and it's very clear what types of sexually explicit books are listed. I'm not going to burn the ears off of your listeners to tell you what that means, but it's very graphically defined in the statute. What types of books that describe or depict these types of behaviors. But again, you can constitutionally feel confident that books that encourage or normalize dangerous behavior can be removed from the school library. And unless you are the Library of Congress, every school has criteria that they use to acquire books. And there's no reason that they can't say that books that promote sexuality, that promote gender identity, that social transitioning should not be removed from the school library.
Mary, thank you so much for joining us today. We
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate you and your expertise. Thanks for shedding light on what's going on here.
You're welcome. Great to see you guys.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Some people want the children to see the books with sexual material, and some people do not want the children to see the books with sexual material.
And I really do think this whole conversation illuminates the the cultural divide that is increasingly growing. And I made the point again, but I just keep coming back to this, that we think it's about school boards, and we think it's about curriculum, and we think it's about books, but underlying that is this debate we're having culturally about what is healthy and ultimately what is the good life. And is it good if our 3, 4, 7-year-olds grow up looking at grandpas in leather embracing and say, oh, isn't that beautiful? It's just another loving couple, as Rodney Trice described them. Or do we want our kids believing that something else is actually the good life and desirable and what to build a civilization on? And if we don't agree on those things, it's really hard to send our kids to the same schools and expect everybody to get along.
Yeah. And as we're wrapping this up, Joseph, I kind of want to share a little story from my life that happened recently that sort of demonstrates this problem. One of my children got a question came up during the school day about sex. It was something that the teacher didn't introduce it. My kids are in private Christian school, but it came up amongst the students. And my child came home and asked me a question, and it precipitated a conversation that we needed to have. And it organically came about, and I was so happy to be able to answer those questions for him. If he had asked one of his teachers the question that he came home and asked me, I hope, even though we send our kids to a school where everyone would agree, we're not supposed to be talking about sex at school. Everyone probably would agree that, but also kind of coming from the same Christian worldview. But I hope if he had gone to one of his teachers and asked them the question that he asked me, that they would have said, you need to go home and ask your mommy and daddy that question, because I want to be the one that is talking to my children about these issues. These are our family values. This is our worldview. These are sensitive conversations. It's kind of a hard conversation even for me to have with my own child, to know what to say and what not to say, how much to say. But it's very personal, and it's something that should be left to the parents within the context of the family and the family values. Sex of any type, these conversations do not belong in schools, and they certainly do not belong in elementary schools.
I'm confident that there are a lot of teachers, even within the government system, that would answer that question in the way that you would prefer.
That's right.
And that a child comes and asks them a question, say, hey, you go home and ask your mom that question and see what she thinks.
That is the only right response.
But the reality is there are a growing number of educators who come through an education preparation system that trains them to be hostile to parents like you and I. And they genuinely believe it is their job in the government school classroom to undo whatever it is that we're trying to do at home with our kids and the values that we're trying to teach them, and to make them think like little Marxist sexual revolutionaries. That and that, depending on who you're talking to, they're very honest about the fact that that's what they believe their job as an educator is. And because that exists, it's basically Russian roulette with the soul of your child, depending on whose classroom that they are in. And the stakes are just too high to just hope it goes well. You can't just roll the dice and we'll see what happens. It's your kid's soul. It's your kid's life, right? So not every educator is out there trying to, destroy your kid's soul, but enough of them are.
Of course not.
Is that you better be really, really careful about the authority figures that you put in front of your kids, and we see them appearing at the legislature, and we see them in classrooms, and they're all over TikTok. There's just too much evidence of this. So the goal here is not to demonize everybody in the government system, but just to raise very aggressively these caution flags, and to the extent that we can have any control over the environment in that the government system is, we want to make sure that it's actually that it's glorifying things that are actually glorious, that we are, even for those children who are not our children, that their vision of what is good, true, and beautiful and desirable is consistent with the creation order, and that we're not encouraging them to love things that are going to destroy them. And that's really what this effort is about. It's why the Parents' Bill of Rights matters. It's the creation order, right? The civilization depends not on healthy elementary school classrooms, but on healthy families. So we want to make sure that the elementary school classrooms do not become the enemy of the family. And that's the problem that we are confronting. Just understand how God created the world. It's better when everything orients around the family, not when everything orients around the government school.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So I think we've done this for today. Friends, we thank you for joining us here on Politics for Happy People. Again, we're at the very beginning of this journey. We are so happy that you are with us. If you've learned something today, please share it with a friend, and they might learn something as well. Also, it does us a huge favor if you will give us a 5-star review wherever you have found us, because that teaches the algorithm that people love us, and then they share us with other people, so other people will love us, and that's how we build our Politics for Happy People family. So we're grateful for your time. We look forward to seeing you. Quick reminder that new episodes drop every single Tuesday and Friday. So we will see you then here on Politics for Happy.